up now, this hour, Colin Kelleher. He's a PhD. So is Dr. Kelleher, really. He is a research scientist and author currently in the biotechnology sector. Dr. Kelleher is a biochemist with a 20-year research career in cell and molecular biology. Following his PhD in biochemistry from the University of Dublin, Trinity College in 1983, Dr. Kelleher worked at the Ontario Cancer Institute, the Terry Fox Cancer Research Laboratory, and the National Jewish Center for Immunology and Respiratory Medicine. Before moving to the biotechnology sector as a senior research scientist, Dr. Kelleher worked as project manager and team leader at a private research institute from 1996 through 2004, using forensic science methodology to unravel scientific anomalies. So, in a moment, Colin Kelleher. Also with us this hour is the legendary George Knapp, who's an 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist whose reporting on Nevada's infamous Area 51 military base was selected by UPI, United Press International, as Best Individual Achievement by a Reporter in 1989. Other awards include the Associated Press's Mark Twain Award for news writing and the Edward R. Murrow Award for investigative reporting. George is an anchor and reporter just over the hill for the CBS affiliate KLAS-TV, and he also writes a weekly column for a Las Vegas newspaper. So, George Knapp and Colin Kelleher, welcome to the program.
Hey, Art, how you doing?
Aha! Both at the same time. George, quickly for you, I billed you as the legendary George Knapp because people have been doing that to me, calling me legendary, and it feels so, I don't know.
It makes me feel old. I think
that's what it does.
I'd rather be nefarious than legendary.
Well, to some, I'm sure you are nefarious. It's great. How long, George, since we have spoken?
Gosh, a couple of years, 4 or 5 years.
At least. Yes, at least.
Welcome back to this neck of the woods, Art.
It's great to be here. And Colin, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Art. It's good to be with you again.
Okay, so I guess the way it's arranged, you'll be with us for an hour, Colin? Is that correct?
Yes, I've got to go back to work, unfortunately, after the hour.
Oh, okay. All right, well then I'll try and direct a little more toward you than George in the first hour, but both of you are up for this because, I want to go back over the ranch. I spent a day with Bob Bigelow this last week, and boy, what a day it was. I got a tour of the aerospace facility, and Bob talked a little bit in that conversation about the ranch, and I thought that things had calmed down, but according to Bob, it's still going on. True?
Yes, I think that's very true. Not only on the ranch, but in the entire area around the ranch. As I think listeners probably know, that area of northeastern Utah near Vernal and Roosevelt has been a hotbed for pretty well 50 years. And the ranch is right in the middle of that hotbed. So the activity really took off when this family moved on in 1994, and then went through a frenetic series of incidents up till about the year 2000. Then it sort of got quiet. But yeah, everything we're hearing is exactly the same as what you were told.
George, have you been up there investigating ever?
Many times. I went 3 times in the past year. The last time I was there was in October. Mostly what's happened is since the book came out, a lot of people have come out of the woodwork with their own stories about things they've seen up in that area. Colin and Bob Bigelow were kind enough to allow me there the first time back in 2002. I'd been pestering them because I was seeing the reports from the ranch,
yes,
although I couldn't tell anybody about it, and it really drove me crazy. And they gave me permission to go ahead and bring a camera to begin work on a documentary, and I've been back, I think, 10 times now. And it's just about as weird as it gets. Each time we've gone back, we've found new witnesses who've added new pieces to the puzzle, but we're no closer to any answers, that's for sure.
Do either one of you have any idea why the ranch, in fact, the area that you describe, is such a hotbed?
I think there's hotspots throughout the world and the United States, and this one just seems to have been going on for decades, if not centuries. Even if you go back into the Native American legends, and the Ute tribe is very prominent and right in that area, you can go back word of mouth 10 to 15 generations, and it's always the same. In fact, I believe there's writings from Father Escalante that document a weird flying object. And I think that's going all the way back to the 18th century. So that particular area, for whatever weird reason, has been a hotbed for decades, if not centuries.
All right, I've had, of course, a series of scientists on the program. I had one last night, and I asked her about this sort of thing, and it was her opinion that vibrational frequencies cause the human brain to see and experience the kinds of things that go on in the ranch and, of course, elsewhere in the world, but that it's entirely going to be explicable, and there's nothing weird about it. There are not ghosts. There are not things that move. There are not any of this. It's all, she said, in the human brain, and a specific vibrational frequency that causes people to see and experience these kinds of things. How would you respond to that?
Well, there's physical evidence. There's ample physical evidence at the ranch in particular that NIDS examined over a period of several years. Vibrational frequencies don't carve up cattle. Vibrational frequencies don't dig giant chunks of soil hundreds of pounds out of the ground. They don't leave tracks on the ground. They don't cause odors. That's a nice theory, but it doesn't explain what happened at the ranch. Not even close.
I mean, one of the famous cases on the ranch happened in March of 1997, when we were called up to the ranch to investigate this 84-pound calf that had been found on the property, and we had a veterinarian with us. He went through all of the pathological findings, did a full necropsy on the animal, and the first thing that he found was this sharp instrument had been used on this animal. It was subsequently verified through 2 forensic labs. So, vibrational frequencies, I think, are all very well for the observer who has nothing except observation. But when you start getting physical evidence, as George has just said, I think that vibrational theory begins to
vibrate away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That particular case, Art, was pretty weird. It was one of the most dramatic of all the mutilation cases that NIDS ever investigated. It was 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and the rancher and his wife were out tagging the ears of newborn calves. They were maybe 50 yards from their ranch house. I mean, it's flat ground, if you've ever seen video of what the property looks like. And they tag the ear of this calf. They go another 100 yards or so, and after maybe a half an hour, they hear this noise. The dog makes a noise looking back in the direction where this calf had been tagged. They see the mother cow sort of dragging its leg, walking around in a circle, obviously upset. They go running back there, and this calf had been completely stripped of flesh. I mean, all basically that was left was bone and hide in broad daylight, right there in clear sight of where they were. No sound, no tracks, no anything. Very strange.
Mm.
Yeah, very strange indeed. All right, well, it's the Gorman family, right? That's the focus of the book, Skinwalker?
Yeah.
That's the name we're using, yes.
Yeah, okay. An obvious question is, with even a fraction of this going on, who in their right minds would stay?
Well, the Gorman family only lasted 18 months on that property. I mean, they purchased the place in 1994. It had been abandoned for many, many years previous to that. They brought their cattle on the property, and then essentially all hell broke loose. Within the space of 15 to 18 months, they lost up to 18 of their herd of 80 animals. And these were not your normal cattle. These were very, very high-end registered animals. So not only did they lose their livelihood, but they were constantly assaulted by these weird phenomena, everything from flying objects to discarnate voices, bizarre animals, poltergeist activity. And then you've got a succession of... sorry?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was going to just ask, when did NIDS first learn of what was going on at this ranch?
In May of 1996. I think Tom Gorman had, at that stage, had reached, and the family especially, had reached a stage of crisis where they were basically sleeping on the floor together in this small homestead for protection. And he began to reach out. He started talking to people in the neighborhood. Word began to filter out. Somebody from the press found out, and then Robert Bigelow found out through that. So the first thing that happened was Robert Bigelow flew up to Vernal and interviewed Tom Gorman, and within, I would say, a matter of weeks, it was decided that the Gormans would move off the property. The National Institute for Discovery Science, which was Bob Bigelow's organization that he had formed with mainstream scientists to study these anomalies, were then moved onto the property. So it happened very, very fast, summer to fall of 1996.
Can either one of you, and I know both of you are very close to Bob, can you tell me what motivates Bob, what makes Bob tick? Why, my God, the man is incredible. Not only has he led investigations like this one, but now he's going to space. I mean, this is not your average guy. What motivates Bob?
Well, his family has a history of experiences going way back, and they've always had an interest in what we would call paranormal activity. And I think when Bob got into a position where he had all the resources he would ever need, he decided he was going to put some of those resources into resolving some of these mysteries, and he has. I would wager to say that he's put more financial support into paranormal UFO-type research than any person ever in the history of the world. He's a complicated guy, obviously. One of the criticisms we've had about the book and about what NIDS was doing up at the ranch is that this must be some sort of a plot by Bob Bigelow to drum up support for some UFO paranormal hotel that he's going to build up there. I don't think people have any idea about just how big Bob Bigelow is, right, and how insignificant something like that would be to him. It's ridiculous.
And the other aspect is somebody who in 1999, as he was walking around the ranch, or 1998, began to ruminate on the possibilities of space. And then not only did he create something, but he actually made it happen. How many people do we know that own their own private space station that is currently orbiting planet Earth? And that has gone from dream to reality in only 7 years. He's built an aerospace company from nothing and successfully launched a space station in the space of 7 years. I mean, that's a testimony to his vision and to his ability to make things happen.
And I got a very good look at the second satellite that is about to be launched. So it's going to continue. If anything, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Bob Bigelow is a very, very complicated man, and I don't fully understand what drives him, but thank God he's there.
Absolutely.
All right, well, with regard to the ranch, I know some of the history, but there's an awful lot of new audience out there, and I know they would just love hearing some of the documented on-video things that have occurred on that ranch.
Colin?
Well, the real beginning, I think, happened very shortly after we bought the property, as I said, in mid to late '96. The first real burst of activity occurred within about 5 months of that, and I think the most spectacular was the calf incident that George just described, but that was part of a 5 or 6 day continuum of almost continuous happenings. Less than 24 hours after that calf was found mutilated on the property, and as George mentioned, in broad daylight, the dogs were absolutely going crazy the following night when myself and Tom Gorman and another scientist up there decided to investigate. So we hopped into this truck and started going out into the middle of the pasture. First thing that the bouncing headlights caught was this large, dark shape about 100 yards away on the fence line. And then the the bouncing headlights picked up this two bright yellow orbs that were about 15 to 20 feet off the ground. What looked like a very large animal perched in the tree. All three of us saw it, and we could think of nothing else except that calf that had been dismembered essentially about 24 hours previously. So we trucked on to about 40 yards from where the tree line was, and the closer we got, the larger this animal got in the tree. It was just staring back with these large yellow saucer eyes.
Right.
Tom Gorman got out of the truck, and he's a trained marksman, grabbed his hunting rifle, and he said, they're not going to get any more of these cattle tonight, was what he said. So he ripped off a shot, and instantly it was like the lights went out. These two yellow orbs just disappeared. Tom was, triumphant. He had actually shot the animal. And he claimed that it had actually fallen to the ground. So we instantly got back into the truck and went right over to the fence line where the animal had fallen. This was like 1 a.m. in the morning, basically. We had flashlights, we had video cameras, so we spread out along the fence line to search for this wounded animal. Then Tom found, he started yelling about 20 yards to my left, said it was a huge animal, that I think it was the dark shape that we had seen on approach that was separate from the animal in the tree. Tom let off a couple more shots into the undergrowth. He said that he had pretty well shot at close range this large bear-like creature. Looked more like a large dog, 400 to 500 pounds. So we were crashing through the undergrowth. And remember, this is out in the boonies at 1 a.m. trying to find these wounded animals or dead animals, not knowing when something would leap out of the undergrowth at us.
Yeah.
So to cut a long story short, there was snow all over the ground. We looked for tracks. We looked for the animals that we were sure had been hit. We found two tracks that were reminiscent of large raptor-like claws, very, very large claws, deep in the snow, but nothing else. There was absolutely no hint of blood. There were no hint of dead animals. I mean, that was, for trained mainstream scientists, for having what looked like 400-pound animals to vanish into the ethers, having been shot at very close range by a trained marksman, was kind of our introduction to this whole, what we termed in the book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. It was like chasing these phantoms that 1 minute were causing serious damage, and at the next minute they would just vanish into thin air. And
More like skin strippers, it sounds like. My God, raptors. That calls to mind something truly awful. All right, we're going to break right here. Colm and George, hold tight. We'll be right back. Colm Kelleher, George, the legendary George Knapp, both my guests right now. This is Coast to Coast AM. Indeed, here I am. Colm Kelleher, George Knapp are both here. Colm has the remainder of this hour with us, so we'll kind of bore in on Colm. There was a incident that occurred at the ranch that I'd love to have him repeat because it caught my imagination. It involved somebody at the ranch with night vision seeing something crawl through a hole that suddenly appeared in midair. Perhaps that in a moment. Bob Bigelow is a very complex man, and the American people should understand the magnitude of what he's doing for them. That said, Colm, there was an incident, wasn't there, in which something was seen to open up. Can you describe that?
Yeah, that I think the incident you're talking about happened in August of '97, and that was really the summer when all hell broke loose on the ranch for NIDS people. It was like every time NIDS people were on the ranch, which was all the time practically, there was stuff happening. And it was about 2 a.m. when we had two observers on this ridge which overlooked a small pasture, and the pasture had been a sort of an epicenter of all sorts of strange happenings previously. So they were staking it out. It was 2 a.m. It was getting late. Nothing had happened. So they were beginning to pack up their equipment when one of them noticed this small, dull yellow light that began to appear on the ground about 200 feet below them, very close to the ground. And as they watched it, they could see, it was strange. It was getting bigger and bigger. It looked like it was just growing, located about 3 feet off the ground. So they thought, well, might as well unpack the equipment again and take a look at this. So one of the things that NIDS had was they had state-of-the-art equipment, including night vision equipment, and then equipment to measure alpha, beta, gamma, you name it, X-ray equipment. So they unpacked the equipment. One guy grabbed the night vision binoculars. The other guy grabbed a camera with infrared film in it. And the guy looking through the night vision equipment could see, he started describing a three-dimensional, rather than a dull yellow light, this actually was a three-dimensional, brightly lit tunnel. And he started describing at the far end of this tunnel that looked like there was movement happening. And the other guy was watching this large, about 4 foot in diameter, dull yellow light. He could not see anything three-dimensional. The guy noticed movement at the end of the tunnel, and then he gradually discerned this shape. It looked like a humanoid shape that was crawling towards him through this tunnel of light that was located about 4 feet off the ground in the middle of nowhere. And this creature became clearer and clearer as it got towards the mouth of the tunnel. And it looked like a human, a large humanoid creature that was entirely black, no features in the face. It was just like a black shadow like face, heavily muscled. And the creature was literally elbowing and maneuvering along this tunnel of light. And finally, it reached the mouth of the tunnel, reached out, struggled onto the ground, stood up, and then vanished into the night.
Wow.
Now, in the meanwhile, the guy who had the camera was taking these long exposure infrared film shots. But immediately after this creature stood up from the mouth of the tunnel and vanished into the night, the diameter of the light started to shrink. And within a couple of minutes, it had shrunk almost to nothing, and then it was gone. So immediately it was gone. The first thing these guys thought of was, this thing is coming up the ridge right after us. So, they were listening for maybe 15 minutes. They didn't hear anything. So eventually got the equipment and clambered down the 200-foot cliff all the way down to where the incident had happened. And the first thing that was obvious was a very strong smell of sulfur in the air exactly where it had happened. And the other thing was there was no sense of, no tracks, there was nothing except that strong smell. They immediately activated all of this portable instrumentation. They searched for anything that might have been left there in terms of residues. They checked for radiation. There was absolutely nothing visible. So after about an hour of reconnoitering, they went back to the command center, where there were 2 other of the researchers who had been stationed further down on the ranch who hadn't seen this incident. But this was a classic incident that happened on the Skinwalker Ranch, where once technology that could see into the infrared was utilized, something became very, very clear, because those dull yellow lights were very, very common on the property, and this was really the first time that they had been captured in the infrared. This night vision technology went very, very deep into the infrared, and it was pretty obvious that this activity was not visible to the human eye, because the guy with the camera could only see the dull yellow light, whereas the guy with the infrared technology could see an awful lot more. Now,
I would think then. I'm sorry. I would think then that you'd be using an awful lot of infrared from there on out.
Yes, pretty around that same time, a set of surveillance cameras that could see into the infrared were installed on the property, on telephone poles, and it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They were rolling. They were monitoring pretty well everything. There was a lot of incidents that happened that were just outside the range of those cameras. It was extremely frustrating, because every time we pointed the cameras in one direction, or in multiple directions, stuff would happen off camera. So it was almost like a cat and mouse game.
I seem to recall there was one incident. I believe they had cameras. Finally, I guess in frustration, you had a couple of cameras pointed at each other, each on poles separated by I don't know how much distance, and something was done. I'm recalling a story that Bob relayed to me in one interview about something that was cut, right?
Yes, that's actually you're right. We had a set of cameras, covering the property, but one of those cameras was focused directly on another set of cameras, and
right.
For whatever reason, this happened in July of '98. Those three cameras suddenly lost power, and the whole focus started investigating why. And once we reached the pole and found what had happened, it was pretty obvious that something had, with tremendous force, ripped the wiring out of all of the cameras on that pole. There was duct tape, layers and layers of duct tape that were binding the wiring that went from the ground into the cameras, the video feed and the electric feed. All of that stuff had been ripped off. PVC piping anchoring the wiring to the pole had been forcibly ripped off. So, something was very angry and was very forceful in dismembering those cameras. But we remembered that we had another camera on another pole that was still running that was directly focused on this damage. So obviously we ran back to the command center and played back the videotape. And this happened at about 8:30 at night during the summer, so there was plenty of light left to still see what had dismembered these cameras. We rolled the videotape, and then it went all the way past the 8:30 timestamp of where we knew the previous cameras had lost power, and there was absolutely nothing on the videotape. You could see sort of cows in the distance grazing sort of peacefully. You could see the pole, and you could see the cameras, but nothing whatsoever could be seen. Now, obviously, we took the footage back to Las Vegas. We got it digitally enhanced. We got it blown up. We really went the whole route on this, and we got it enhanced to the extent where you could see the tiny lights on the three cameras as they lost power. You could actually see that on the videotape, but
wow.
You could not see anything about what or who had completely destroyed those cameras. I mean, what had happened, it looked like there was a very, very forceful, brute strength operation that had completely destroyed these cameras. And we had caught it on film, but there was nothing on film.
So that's completely impossible.
Well, I mean, we went through all of these gaming exercises about, was there any possibility that somebody in deep camouflage could have crawled along the ground? But I mean, there was sufficient light and there was sufficient granularity on the video, especially when it was blown up, to detect anything close to that telephone pole with the cameras. And we went round the block on this. We replayed it hundreds of times. We analyzed it up the yin-yang, and the bottom line is there was nothing caught on camera. But at the same time, there was this tremendous physical force. It goes back to your scientists from last night talking about vibrational frequencies. These are physical impacts that leave evidence that have nothing to do with vibrational frequencies.
Yeah. Since we have you for only such a short time, Colm, I'm curious. Since I've been told that there's recent activity, what kind of recent activity at the ranch or the area?
Well, I know that there's a lot of witnesses coming out with strange flying objects, balls of light. One of the classic things about that we're seeing multiple times on the property were these orbs of light, and they may be different colors. We saw bright white ones. The Gorman family used to see blue ones. Red ones caused a lot of damage to cattle. Other eyewitnesses have come forward, especially recently around the property, to also claim that there's flying lights in the area. we don't know why this activity is continuing or what has triggered it again, but we know that there's a strong discouragement from going anywhere near that property. It is under surveillance right as we speak, and so trespassing is absolutely out of the question. Trespassers will be prosecuted.
Okay. Colm, you said started up again. So there was kind of a lull period. When did it begin again?
Well, this is just hearsay because it's been 2 years since I've left. But from the feedback that we've got, it started up less than a year ago. And it's not only on the ranch, as I said. A lot of the eyewitnesses that have come forward as a result of of reading this book have essentially completely supported all of the activity on the property, but have extended the radius not only on the ranch to the entire area. So this particular area of northeastern Utah has been a hotspot for so long. We went through all of the aeromagnetic surveys of the area. We were trying to track gravitational anomalies. We did an awful lot of footwork to see if there was anything unique about the area. We couldn't come up with anything.
The only rap that I've ever heard on Bob Bigelow and on NIDS is that it keeps things pretty close to their chest, your chest. I guess you're still involved. You're still there. So, and I guess, George, you've probably heard this from others, other researchers, that they get a little frustrated because NIDS does keep things to themselves until they've got everything investigated and the final reports in. So at the beginning, when you heard about this ranch, George, I know you've got kind of an in, but did you get in right away, or was there a bit of work involved?
Yeah, it took a while for me to convince both Colm and Bob Bigelow to let me on the property, especially with the television camera. And I assured them, look, I'm going to work on this thing, but we'll wait until the time is right to go public with something. Because frankly, I mean, this is an ongoing scientific investigation. And I know it's frustrating for people outside of NIDS that they don't know what's going on. But I mean, you don't invite the public in to participate in cancer research or something. Yeah. This entity, this precognitive sentient entity, which is Colonel John Alexander's name for it, it's an interactive process. And people being on the ranch, it affects what goes on there. So having trespassers and things of that sort is not something that NIDS wanted to do. So, yeah, they kept it quiet. In addition, what the heck do you tell the world? I mean, the problem for scientists like Colm and others is that nothing on this ranch and the more than 100 incidents that NIDS investigated is reproducible. Nothing ever happened the same way twice. This thing, this entity, this intelligence was wily and cagey, almost like stalking big game or something. It never did the same thing twice. And it seemed to be able to read people's thoughts. Well, if you're trying to investigate something like that and nothing is reproducible, and you're trying to be a reputable scientific organization that interests mainstream scientists into investigating paranormal type activity, you don't want to come forward with something that's half-baked and say, hey, by the way, we had a giant Sasquatch crawl through a tunnel of light, and what do you think about that?
So at this point, it's a good question, George and Colm. What do you tell the world? What was I haven't read Skinwalker yet, but what essentially did you tell the world about what you conclude is happening there?
Well, we essentially cataloged all of or many of the phenomena that had happened, and then we went through all of the possible explanations. The usual cast of characters. We investigated the idea of fraud. We went through the idea of dimensional realities. We went through extraterrestrial visitation. We went through hallucinations, this kind of thing. But we deliberately did not draw a conclusion, an absolute firm conclusion from the research, because, as George mentioned, this has been an ongoing project. I left NIDS 2 years ago, but I know that the research is continuing at a different level. But the object is not to draw any specific conclusions, because if we do, I think we can go off on a tangent that could just lead nowhere.
Okay. Did you ever feel that there was a time when you were close to communication with some kind of intelligence or making a breakthrough of some kind that would be documentable and, the smoking gun?
Yes, we really felt during the summer of 1997 that beginning with that calf incident, right through the summer, there was a tremendous amount of activity. We were interacting with something. It was obvious. We had constructed a series of watchtowers that had dogs as biosensors on the ranch. We were getting a tremendous amount of visual sightings, and we were interacting with something that was manifesting in many, many different ways, but we definitely had the sense we were interacting. And we even went to the extent of attempting to be proactive in interacting with whatever was there, leaving messages out, leaving boxes full of bricks and bricks with different symbols on them. And there was many different attempts to communicate, but it was never, the communication never happened on our terms. It was always on whatever was on this property. We were never able to, catch it unaware, so to speak.
Were you trusted by your neighbors?
It was a very slow process. When we first arrived, we had the reputation as, this was this kind of very wealthy organization of scientific people with probably government connections, this whole thing. So there was a lot of distrust, but I think over time, we visit the neighbors many times, we talked to them. I think over time we did build trust. And certainly the immediate neighbors around the ranch all reported almost identical phenomena to what the Gorman family had reported on their property. So, the 5 or 6 properties that surrounded the ranch were experiencing exactly the same thing. So that gave us a tremendous amount of credibility,
I guess that
a tremendous amount of credibility.
Yeah, I guess that word has leaked out in some quarters where the ranch is located, but let's make this appeal right now. It's really more than an appeal. You said it an appeal. You said it earlier that trespassers will be prosecuted.
Yes.
So if you know where the ranch is, don't go there. This is serious scientific work, and it's underway. It's still underway right now, right, Colin?
Yes. The ranch is under constant surveillance, and there are people stationed on the property. So it is absolutely not acceptable to trespass on that property.
All right, Colin, the hour's up. That's it. Boy, it went that fast. Colin, thank you for being here. I can't thank you enough for taking the hour and spending it with us.
Well, thank you so much, Art. It's great to connect with you again.
We'll have to have you back for a whole show. I could do a whole show plus with you. All right, we'll do that. Colin, thank you. Good night. And George, you're coming up next. Here I am. George Knapp is here. And he really is, I was joking about it earlier, but he really is a legend in his own time. He is an amazing man who was a mainstream reporter in Las Vegas, an investigative, albeit eventually an investigative reporter, but quite a guy. And then suddenly, in the way that I did, in the way that I turned Coast from what it was to what it is, George kind of did the same thing. It's been a very strange career track for George. We'll talk about all of that and a lot more in a moment. A lot of people wouldn't know it, but George and I actually go back quite a ways. We've been in meetings that I can't describe with Bob Bigelow and all kinds of interesting things. So we've been at it for a while. George, what happened to your career? I mean, if you go way back, how in the world did you get from point A to B?
Well, sort of like you, Art. Remember Area 2000?
Yes, very well.
That goes back, 93?
Sure.
It's sort of like with you. I mean, I stumbled onto a story about Area 51. I approached it the same way I'd approach any other story, and it's pretty much changed my life. Now, I'm still a mainstream reporter. I don't do a lot of UFO stuff. There's no prohibition by my employers, but they prefer me to do other things, and I do a reasonable job at it here in my hometown. But I guess I'll always be known as a UFO reporter because of those stories we did back in 1989. May will mark 18 years since those first reports about Area 51 sort of helped put it on the map, the whole Lazar stuff.
Well, of course, the whole nation.
Parallels to you, Art.
Yeah, there are. The whole nation didn't hear about Area 51. They didn't hear those early reports, George. You know, that first one, the first one you did must have been rough. I mean, really rough.
Well, yeah, and it was amazing how it touched the pulse of the public, the reaction from the public, how much interest there was from just people on the street, just everywhere. I mean, the phones rang off the hook, and then other media beat a path to Area 51's door, and I took a lot of grief over it. Sure, I still get grief when someone has a problem with me, some politician that I'm going after. They'll always whip out the flying saucer, little green men stuff, ha, ha, ha.
Sure.
I don't mind. Because I work for the people, the public. They want to know about this stuff, so I don't craft my reports for politicians or other journalists.
No, I can understand why they whip that one out, of course, and it's done to me. But it's a lot easier for me because it's my bread and butter. I do this. This is all I really do. For you, you've got to occasionally switch from very mainstream to Area 51, for example. That's a much tougher path for you.
Yeah, I suppose so. But, as long as you keep focused and try to approach the topic the same way you would any other news subject, you can't get in that much trouble. I mean, you catch some grief here and there from people that wish you ill, but I don't mind.
I approach it the same way. Area 51, is it still there?
Well, of course, it's there. It's still a vital base in our national security apparatus. It is still as busy as ever, contrary to some erroneous reports. The planes leave the Janet terminal every day and fly out there, and they fly back at night. The buses still go up that dirt road. There are thousands of people there. You can see from satellite photos that they've installed new facilities. They're expanding, building things underground.
There was this big story, George, as you know. There was a big story that, what was going on at Area 51 had been moved to somewhere in Utah or somewhere in New Mexico or whatever. You're saying it's not true.
Right. I think that guy from Popular Mechanics went up a wrong road, found nobody there, and concluded that Area 51 had somehow shut down. And boy, was he mistaken. I think perhaps the stuff we're talking about, if in fact there were ever any recovered alien vehicles out there, that they probably have been moved somewhere else or stuck in a closet somewhere, for the simple reason that so many people still go out there looking for it. So if you wanted to test fly that stuff, it would seem you'd have to find a place deeper in the test site or some other base without so much attention.
From the investigation you did do way back when, is there any doubt in your mind that they were flying craft and testing craft that had been recovered or obtained one way or the other from elsewhere?
Well, I suppose there will always be some doubt. I lean toward that being the case. I mean, it was not just Bob Lazar. I had more than 24 people who have worked out there over the years who've told me bits and pieces of the same story, witnesses who've seen these things flying around, people who have worked on the program and seen things inside hangars and know that we were taking these things apart to figure out how they worked, not the other way around. So I believe that it was there at some point. Can I prove it conclusively? No.
If you could go back now and not do those reports and not get involved with Area 51, Bob Lazar, John Lear, the whole thing, if you could just erase it and not do it, would you?
No, I'd do the same thing. I might do a better job of it, but there's no question that I would do it. It's just opened so much up for me, not only as a journalist, but as a human being, and opened my eyes to a lot of stuff that I might not have otherwise seen.
Yeah, I bet. All right, now the ranch, when you finally did get access to the ranch, did you see enough, did you investigate yourself enough to become a believer that these stories that we were hearing were indeed happening?
Very much so, in part because of the credibility of Bob Bigelow and the people that work with NIDS. I mean, these are serious guys. They weren't out looking for attention. They were trying to investigate this stuff. And then, going up there and interviewing witnesses, talking to neighbors, people who live in the area, researching the history of it. People wonder if this is a government psychological warfare campaign or something like that. This stuff has been going on in that region before there was a U.S. government. Father Escalante, who had his sightings and wrote about them in his journal, that was back in 1776. Native American traditions say it's been going on a lot longer than that. So, it's not a government operation. It's there. It's real. I've interviewed enough people to be convinced of that, plus the evidence collected by the folks at NIDS over a 7-year intensive study. I mean, that area is the most intensely studied paranormal hotspot in history.
Any guesses? If you had to guess, and I am asking you to guess, what do you think is going on there?
It's, and this is purely a guess. We tried to rule out more things than as opposed to coming to a conclusion because there's not enough evidence to demonstrate something conclusively. But it seems dimensional. It seems like this is a portal of some sort. The rancher, Tom Gorman, recalled seeing what looked like a sun in the sky through which objects would enter and leave. And on the other side of this big orange ball sun-like object, he could see another sky. It suggests that maybe there are other worlds out there, parallel universe, alternate dimensions. I'm not smart enough to be able to figure that stuff out, but as we mentioned in the book, it's sort of consistent with some of the research on the cutting edge of physics and cosmology right now, the concept of the multiverse.
That's right.
It fits, it fits. There's a physicist named Dr. Jack Sarfati, who's a regular listener of this program, who he read the book and it sort of light bulb went off. It sort of fits with where modern science is heading about the nature of our reality. And it seems like what's going on at the ranch is kind of a learning curve, that they're giving us a little bit of rope and dragging us along a bit at a time so that we somehow understand that the reality isn't what it used to be, that the world is a much bigger, more mysterious, and more complex place than we ever imagined.
You carried cameras up there. Did you ever catch anything that you could air?
No. Well, we've got stuff that we can air, but if you're asking me, do I ever catch anything anomalous on camera?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yes.
I do have some of the stuff from NIDS archives, the mutilation incidents and tracks and things of that sort. We interviewed a lot of witnesses up there. We interviewed NIDS staffers, collected a great deal of material for this documentary that one of these days I'll get finished, but nothing like a flying saucer, no. My buddy Colum, one of the first trips I made up there, my pal Colum, he decides that I have this inherent weirdness quotient and that maybe I might make something happen. So he takes me out in the middle homestead where a lot of this strange stuff had happened, where that tunnel of light had appeared, where animals had been butchered and others disappeared, where a predator-type object had materialized and scared the bejesus out of everyone. It's the middle of the night. And he puts me on a chair there and leaves me to see if something comes to get me. Now, before this, yeah, my pal, right? Before this, we had done some things that in the past had riled this entity up. We got a big earth mover and dug around a lot of dirt. That seems to get its attention. We built a big fire, made a bunch of noise, tried to get its attention, and then plopped me out on a chair for a while in the middle of nowhere and left me. So I'd like to tell you that I was brave and I wasn't concerned at all, but I was. I mean, it was a scary thing. The only thing
you were like chum in the water.
Yeah. The only thing that came to get me were mosquitoes, though. So I'm happy to report.
Okay, back to Mr. Bigelow for a moment. He's quite a guy, and Ross, I get these little messages. I do the program here. Ross in West Palm Beach, Florida, said, Art, I'm looking at Mr. Bigelow's website right now. And honestly, Mr. Bigelow reminds me of S.R. Haddon, the billionaire in the movie, your favorite movie, mine, Contact. And I've been saying that for years. He really does remind me of H.R. Haddon. How about you?
Yeah, that fits. I got a tour of his facility out there right from the first day that it was built, and I've been there many times. And he invited us to be there on the morning of the launch. And Bob Bigelow had never done a TV interview before. I know he's spoken to you many times, and we got him to go on camera, and he was good at it. And now we are negotiating to get him on camera to talk about the ranch. And when I can get that nailed down, that'll be a coup.
Oh, it certainly will be, and quite a story. My God, what a story that'll be! And
well, it's everything. It's a paranormal Disneyland. It's the UFO stuff of everything from Winnebago-sized UFOs to flying sombreros to the balls of light that Colin talked about. It's poltergeist type stuff. It's a laundry list of strange things, and it's a heck of a story for a newsman.
Boy, it really is. There have been sort of offshoots to all of this, and the early stuff involved Bob Lazar, John Lear. Now, from today's perspective, as the story has unfolded and bits and pieces have either been confirmed or refuted over the years, I guess I've got to ask, what is your take on the two of them, Bob Lazar and John Lear?
Well, on Lazar, I know that the world of ufology has pretty made up its mind that Bob is not truthful, and I don't think it's as simple as that. Now, there are gaps in his story and things that don't add up. For example, I always have said from day one that the weakest part of the story dealt with his lack of academic credentials. The schools that he went to say he was never there, and Bob has never gone to any great lengths to prove that he was there. However, I lived through this stuff. I know the strange things that were happening back there. I know how government agencies reacted to the story coming out, and the phones were tapped and people were followed around and threats were made back then. I know how Los Alamos Lab reacted to my inquiries about his employment. I know what happened when he got into legal trouble here and the stories that he told the courts when he was facing prison time. I believe him. I believe he is telling the story as he knows it. That does not mean it is a literal truth, because we both know that games can be played by the folks who run these kinds of programs. So, I think there was something out there. I think Bob is telling the truth about it. I don't exactly know why it all spilled out as it did, but I hope to one day. John Lear is also a complicated guy. I don't take everything he says literally. But I owe him a debt of gratitude, because way back when I was starting in this stuff, in fact, he got me to do the first UFO program. I had a little talk show called On the Record that we did about a year before I ever met Lazar. And it was incredible. I put him on that little talk show that nobody watches, that aired like 5 o'clock in the morning and had politicians normally on it, and my phone rang off the hook. And I wonder, what the heck is this deal? I mean, I'd always had the same kind of curiosity about UFOs as the next guy, but had John on again, and the response was tremendous, and I realized this is something I've got to look into. This is something that touches the pulse of the public. So I owe John a debt of gratitude in that sense, and he provided me with a great deal of information in the beginning. I do not take everything he says, though, literally.
That makes two of us. I agree with you on all counts. I have interviewed now, I think Bob Lazar 2 or 3 times. And I'll tell you something, George. When you get somebody with a wild story, you interview them once. There it is. And generally the second and third time you interview them, the story grows. And that never happens with Bob. Bob's story is so consistent. His presentation of it is so calm, collected, and the story doesn't grow. It's just what it is. And I believe he's telling the truth.
Well, and plus the fact that he doesn't care whether people believe him or not.
That's right.
He doesn't go out of his way to seek attention about this stuff. You don't want to believe him? Fine. He has nothing.
No, in fact, actually quite the opposite. He's hard to get to come on the radio at all. It's kind of like, I've told my story. That's it. I'd rather not come on again, but you can sort of drag him on, and when you do, you get the same story. He is right. So consistent.
That's right. I had a chance to fill in for you, Art, when you were in the Philippines, and had Bob on the show, and it was like pulling teeth to get him to do it. But once you get him there and get him rolling, it's good stuff, and it's the same stuff that you heard almost 18 years ago.
Do you believe that they took element, what was it? I think 115, right? Out of Area 51. Do you think that happened?
That Bob and or cohorts did? Yeah, I do believe it.
Yes.
Yeah, because I saw it. I saw it it was in a leaden container that was at his house for a time period. I saw some experiments they did with what they call a cloud chamber, how this thing sort of bent light. I had no idea you had seen it. Yeah. When Bob thought he was going to be, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'll go ahead. When Bob thought he was going to be taken out, he had this particle accelerator at his house, and he had this container with the 115 in it right in front of it. And he was ready to flip a switch and say goodbye to Las Vegas, I think. I don't know if that was a dramatic gesture or what it was, but thank God he didn't do it. Now,
I've never heard this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's not a pretty picture. I've really made some effort over the years. I guess obviously not enough effort to find that stuff because it's obtainable. I think it's obtainable.
There was a movie in which they called something like that unobtainium.
Yeah, right.
It is obtainable. So you actually saw this stuff. You saw some of the experiments. This is really important.
I did. They had it in a lead-cased, disc-shaped container. They also, at one point, had done, like I said, these experiments with this cloud chamber where this it appeared to bend the smoke that was floating around inside this cloud chamber. I couldn't figure out how they did it. I'm not a scientific expert. I guess they could have pulled the wool over my eyes, but they were doing these experiments for themselves, Bob and some of his cohorts, and having fun with it.
Yeah, but see, this is doubted. This is one of the parts of the story very much doubted by many, and so you just sort of put a piece of the puzzle in the truth area that frankly I wasn't all that sure of. So, wow.
Well, Bob had said they had several hundred pounds of this stuff up there, and of course the scientific community scoffs at that. When Bob first said they had 115 up there, 115 officially did not exist. It does now. Right. Although the stuff that was synthesized lasted only a few microseconds and does not sound like what Bob described. Well, he sticks to the story that this would be a different isotope. It's you got to mix different stuff in there for it to stabilize stable? As he saw it.
Yeah. Wow. Do you know what became of the 115 that Bob had?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Proceed.
Well, I don't think I can tell you that. We can talk about it off the air, Art, but I still have sort of a plan in mind. It's going to be difficult, though, so maybe we can do that together.
So the 115 continues to be in existence.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was all the folks who made fun of Bob for that stuff didn't realize that there's this heavy ion research lab in Germany that was calling him up all the time, asking for suggestions and looking for guidance in how they could eventually make the stuff, and they have. Now they've made it.
Oh, my God. All right, we're breaking. We'll be right back. This is Coast. I do live among the creatures of the night. My guest is George Knapp. Colm Kelleher was here in the first hour. George is a institution within the reach of the CBS affiliate here in Las Vegas. Absolutely an institution, actually a legend. And he just delivered a bit of serious breaking news. We'll be right back. All right, I'm going to leave the area 115 part of it for a future conversation. I'm going to ask you, George, how much you know that you have not yet reported on that you keep to yourself. I mean, is there a lot of stuff that you know that you can't or won't talk about?
In regard to 51?
Or any of this area?
Well, there are some details about that particular story, personal stuff that has not come out. On the subject of 115, by the way, Art, there is in the second series of UFOs stories that I did in 1990, there is a brief snippet of video of the container, and it just is in passing. I don't make any reference to it. It's just sort of a little inside joke. So there's some of that stuff, yeah. There is some stuff about the ranch that has not come out. Colm and I had a debate about it as we were working on the book of how much to include, because some of the things just get so far out there that we worried it was, essentially it's something for everyone to hate. It just gets it almost becomes ridiculous at a point. And we debated about whether to leave some of it out. We tried not to, only because, if we censor ourselves because we're worried about looking silly, we're not doing a very good job of telling a story. There are bits and pieces that have not come out, but I think they eventually will.
Okay. Lee in Wasilla, Alaska says, "Hey, Art, just signed up for Streamlink. Love it. Good plug, I guess. First, pass blast. Question about the Gorman Ranch. How much do you think the federal government knows about what goes on there? How much have they tried to find out? Have you had people poking their nose that you think are government types around the ranch?
Yeah, they've been there since the beginning. Tom Gorman had numerous sightings of these folks on the perimeter of the property. There have been a lot of flyovers, things of that sort. My most recent trip, I found a guy, a rancher, who was a friend of Gorman's and wanted to buy the property himself. They had some investments together, so they're people who know each other real well. He'd been on the property, saw some of these objects floating around, had his own experiences. He was visited in the height of the activity. He got visited by a guy from the U.S. Navy, and I thought, well, this story's not going to go anywhere. As I'm interviewing him about this guy, asking questions about what's really going on the ranch, and then he whipped out a business card and he gave me the guy's business card. So I wrote all that stuff down. He's a real person. I'm not going to give the name just yet. I can tell it to you privately, but I'm going to track the guy down and see if I can get him to tell me who the heck he was working for. Now, the question arises, I suppose, is the government there monitoring what was going on, or are they causing it? And I think Tom Gorman, the rancher, for a lot of the time he was there, thought it was some sort of a military operation, that the government was doing this, trying to, for some reason, drive him off the property. That's not the conclusion we reached. I mean, because some of the stuff that happened, it's just not something that humans can do. The scariest stuff, not the monsters, not the UFOs, the scariest stuff to me were the more mundane things that happened on the property. And this I can't imagine some Delta Force commando doing. For example, the mom goes to town. She buys a week's worth of groceries, comes home, takes all the groceries out of the bags, puts it in the cupboard, goes to the bathroom, comes back, and all the groceries are back in the bag. Or she would, every morning she'd take a shower. She locks the door. She puts her towel and her hairbrush on the cabinet. She would get out of the shower and they're gone. And she'd find like the hairbrush in the freezer, or weird little stuff like that just makes the hair on my arm raise up. And it's the kind of thing that I don't see a commando force or military ops doing that sort of thing.
No, I don't think so. Although you just have to wonder if I don't know. I guess it would be a way of diverting attention if they could accomplish something like that. But as you point out, that kind of thing, no.
Well, plus the fact that it's been going on for so long. I mean, the military isn't responsible for the UFOs that were flying around there 50 or 100 years ago.
That's right. All right. Your reports, as much as anything else in the world on Area 51, have caused, I get these calls all the time. Art, I'm going to go to Area 51. I'm going to take some friends of mine. We're going to crash and get our way into Area 51. Do you have any advice for these folks that think they're going to crash their way into Area 51?
Don't try it. You're out of your mind. I mean, it is a secure location. A lot of people have tried that. They get in trouble. They get caught. They have sensors all around the facility. I've heard bits and pieces of stories of people who have tried. I only know of one that got in, and that was this guy who walked all the way across the test site from the other side, looking for evidence that the 49ers had traveled across Papoose Lake, and eventually he found it. And he managed to evade all that. He's dying of cancer now, perhaps from radiation exposure while he was out there, but he's the only one I know that's ever managed to do it. I really strongly advise against that sort of thing.
I remember working for KDWN in Las Vegas, George, during the years they were still doing the tests, and we'd go on the air and say, look, there's going to be a test at such and such. We're now warning people on high buildings and precarious locations to get down. And then, of course, there would be, a nuclear-induced earthquake. And so that went on for years and years and years. Do you know anything at all about how dangerous it still might be to go trekking across that ground?
Well, there are hot spots out there. I think there are radioactive waste sites as well that you can see on test site maps. I mean, they map it out and spell it out pretty clearly. I think most of the above ground tests that those areas are pretty safe, but there are bad spots out there. There's no question about it. Plus, they're testing all sorts of other things. They have different programs that they're trying to find a use for the test site, materials programs, chemicals, things of that sort, that goes on out there, and there's dangerous stuff. I mean, it's a national security installation for a reason.
I'm sure. Do you have any insight? Are you able, for example, to occasionally, well, because you've been on this story for so many years, even when you're not on it, you're on it. And I would imagine that an Area 51 employee who wanted to talk would find you. Have they?
Sure. More than 24 of them over the years.
Wow.
Some of them I did not find credible, but the 24 I'm talking about are people who I did find credible and who had little bits and pieces and weren't trying to make more of it than they should. Sure, they find me on occasion. It's been a while since any have come forward. That program, I like I said, I can't imagine that anything is still out there. And I suspect that they may think that I'm monitored in some way, and if they had information and wanted to come forward, might think twice about it. But yeah, I get them.
You probably are monitored.
I don't doubt it. If for a while, I certainly was, because some of the guys who were following me around for a while told me about it years later. So I'm not sure that they still tune in, but maybe they're listening to all of us.
I'm sure they listen to this program. I've assumed for years that my phones were tapped, and I still assume that. I just assume it, and I'm sure yours were, but you actually talked to people who had been assigned to follow you?
Yeah, they sort of laughed about it. This was 6 or 7 years after the Lazar stuff sort of peaked.
Huh. Well, if the Lazar story was pure fabrication, if the Lear stuff was complete fabrication, then why assign anybody at all from the government to follow you?
Yeah, it's curious. You know, the phones, there was clear evidence that the phones were being monitored at the TV station, and it really bothered me at the time. But I had 6 different people who called offering to give me bits and pieces of information who, right after it, were visited by various entities and told to shut the hell up.
Mm-hmm.
And I verified those. One of them even used to work for the TV station. He had been at 51 and offered to give me an interview with his face blacked out. And the very next morning, he's followed to work by guys speaking into telephones and microphones and stuff, and followed home, and he got scared. I had a lady who works for the local court system who had previously been a secretary for a test site contractor, one of the big companies out there, who said that she had transcribed this meeting where they discussed crashed saucers, recovered discs and bodies. And she,
Wow.
through a third party, a police officer, had agreed to meet with me and tell me the story. And the very next day, after we had our initial phone conversation, she gets a visit from these 2 guys, supposedly from her former employer, who, first of all, reminded her that she still was under some sort of security restrictions. And then they said, "We know that you travel back and forth to see your daughter in Los Angeles and that she comes here. We'd hate to see an accident happen to either one of you." Well, she was petrified.
Yeah, of course.
And like I said, that happened 6 times in a row, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
Now, I know there are signs in the area that say lethal force. I guess there are still signs saying lethal force can be used if you go beyond this point.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you think that for somebody who might want to tell a tale, the government is prepared to use lethal force no matter where it needs to be applied?
I don't think so. I mean, they've had so many intrusions out there, and you recall that, you know, at the edge of the base is 11, 12 miles from the main facilities itself. You'd have to, you know, so they have a lot of leeway there. There's a big buffer zone, and they know you're there. So they don't need to shoot you as soon as you cross the border, and mostly what they do is detain people and then call the Lincoln County Sheriffs and haul you away.
Right.
I've heard the wild stories about shooting out tires and things of that sort. I've seen video that they will buzz you. They've buzzed me in helicopters and will chase you out of there if it comes to it. But I don't think they'd shoot you unless they really had to, and you were barreling along in your Winnebago intent on getting out on the flight line or something.
Right, but they do have that official authorization.
Oh, they do. Yeah, it's written. I don't know what the U.S. code is, but it's written right there on the warning signs all over the base.
Would you say you're convinced or close to convinced that at one time they had UFOs, they had alien craft there?
Yeah, I think so. I think they had something that looks like it. And as I said, you know, enough of the people, in addition to Lazar, have said that we were taking them apart to figure out how they worked. And it makes a lot of sense on another level that if in fact there is recovered technology like that, And of course, in ufology, there are many stories about that sort of thing. Some of them very well documented. The Roswell case coming to mind. If you, in fact, you had that stuff, then Area 51 would be a logical choice where you would take it.
Sure.
Now as a result of the stories and the coverage you've given it and I've given it, there are still thousands of people every year who make the trek out into the desert to see whatever is flying around out there. People have suggested, well, maybe this is disinformation to divert attention away from something else that was flying around out there. Well, if so, then it's been a miserable failure because it has attracted far more attention, the UFO stories, than they ever could have possibly imagined. I mean, every major news organization in the world has been there. You can't hardly turn on the television without an Area 51 special airing at some time of the day or night. And as I said, people are still going out there. So if they didn't want attention for something they had going on out there, that was a bad call.
I had quite a number of interviews. I was lucky to have interviewed Colonel Corso a number of times before his death. Now, he maintained that as a result of Roswell, there was a lot of recovery. There was recovery of all kinds of technical stuff that was slowly then, in fact, it was his job to filter this stuff into U.S. industry in a quiet kind of way. Do you buy into that?
Well, I do. I met Colonel Corso in, I think, 1992, which was, 5 years before the Roswell anniversary, 5 years before the rest of the world heard about him. We had a deal for him to come out here, and I was going to interview him on camera, and that didn't happen. A couple of years later, I told Bob Bigelow about that story, and he arranged to go back and meet Corso and to hear his story. I have a copy of his original manuscript, which is far different from what eventually was published. And we checked him out. We did a lot of legwork to find out that he was who he said he was, that he worked where he claimed to work, and that it was entirely possible, and supported by, I think, the memoirs of his commanding officer, General Trudeau, that this really did happen. Now, I know that there are problems that people have with subsequently what happened to the material and how things like computer chips and fiber optics developed and who should get the credit. I'm not going to jump into that. I just don't know enough about it. But I find Colonel Corso, I found him to be honorable and believable. And and if in fact that stuff happened, and if our government had it, the military had it, then it would have ended up at Area 51 eventually. That would be my guess.
Okay. You said the manuscript was substantially different. Can you document any ways that are important for us?
Not quite as ambitious in its scope in claiming the different technologies that we know so well today, that all of them developed directly from recovered stuff from crash sites. That's the main thing. It just wasn't quite as expansive, and I did not find that Colonel Corso was quite the dashing swashbuckler that he became in later years. It just seemed a lot more ambitious when it finally came out. Now, Bill Burns, who has been on your show many times, I find him to be a very credible guy. He's the one to put these questions to because he knows a lot more about it. But like I said, it was a much more modest version, the one I read.
Okay. Next to Roswell, and certainly in modern times, the Phoenix Lights, close by to us. In fact, we actually had sort of an offshoot sighting in Las Vegas, as you well know, from the Phoenix Lights. Seems to be the most modern, big occurrence. You looked into the Phoenix Lights, obviously. What did you conclude?
Well, I looked into it somewhat. I would hate to be, an expert, considered an expert on it. I looked at it somewhat, and I don't know. I really can't tell. I know that those videos don't look like flares to me. They don't operate like flares. I think the military really screwed up in their explanation for this thing, first by saying nothing and then coming up with this lame excuse about training operations and exercises. I don't think those look like training exercises to me, the videos I've seen. So I think it was something else, whether it's from way out there, I don't know, or whether it's some secret military plane. I mean, people are seeing a lot of these giant black triangles all over the country. NIDS did an excellent study on that, by the way, before the operation sort of faded. But it sounds to me like we've got something like that.
We, as you know, I saw that triangle. I saw it so close, George, I could have thrown a rock at the damn thing. It came directly over my head and that of Ramona, and then just sort of kept going, floating across the valley. It certainly wasn't flying. It was floating. It's real, whatever it is. Do you have any insight on these triangles?
Well, it seems to be some sort of a weapons platform, an observatory platform of some sort. One of the stories I had heard from some intelligence folks is that it's basically sucking up data, that it flies over and sucks up computer records and phone records and intercepts all kinds of electronic communications and just sucks it up and analyzes it. That's one version. I can't tell you if that's true or not. But it would seem to me it makes a lot of sense. I mean, these things have flown slowly over American cities. If it's a secret project, that doesn't seem very smart to it exposed to that kind of thing. There are trajectories that have been analyzed by NIDS that show sort of the most common routes for these things involve air routes between different military bases, Air Force bases. So nothing definitive, but I suspect we've got something like this. Doesn't mean all the ones that we see like this are ours.
Well, what I saw wasn't flying. The only explanation could be it was a lighter than air craft of some sort. There was no noise. It was going so slowly. It must have been doing 30, 35 miles an hour at the most, maybe less. And no noise, big, metallic looking, not flying. I mean, you got to put enough air under something for lift. It wasn't doing that. It was floating. So either it was lighter than air or it was defying gravity. I have no idea which, but it was doing that.
Well, there is a paper trail of our military requesting those exactly a craft just like that for transport or whatever, asking that these things be developed. Now, whether they have, I don't think there's a smoking gun on that, but it would make sense that we might want something like that. Now, does it mean that, because some of these things float as you described, but I've also heard descriptions of them floating for 1 minute and then zoom, taking off in the next.
That's right.
Yeah. I really don't know what to make of it.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground. When we get back from the break, which is rapidly arriving, we're going to open the phone lines for George Knapp. Now, please, folks, if you can, make your questions relevant. They can cover an awful lot of territory because that's exactly what we've done. From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I'm Art Bell. Good morning, everybody. Here I am. George Knapp is my guest. He is fully an institution and a legend. I should laugh about that, but I won't because he really is. He's been in Las Vegas for as long as I can remember, reporting for our CBS affiliate here. Any number of times he has officially, for the station, looked into Area 51, and an awful lot of what you're hearing tonight. Now, I want to get his comment in a moment on what happens in ufology, and what happens is it eats its young. It's absolutely horrible what goes on. Ufology just sort of self-destructs. So in a moment, we'll find out what George thinks about that, and your calls coming right up. George, ufology does more damage to itself than all the chuckling newspaper articles that are ever written. Any comments on that?
Can't argue with you there, Art. Ufology is a mess. I mean, it starts with the premise of what's a ufologist, and anyone can become one just by saying so, and there are a lot of really good people in the field who have worked for a long time to get to the bottom of this mystery, but they do it in spite of ufology because you got so many crazies and zealous religious type saucer nuts who are firmly convinced they know what the truth is. They know the mind of the aliens. They know where these people come from. I try to approach it as a news story that you follow the evidence where it leads and don't lock yourself into something. Ufology wants to be taken seriously. It wants respect from mainstream science. I don't blame mainstream scientists from staying away from it because of all the backbiting and backstabbing and infighting and nastiness there is in the field. It drives people away. Dr. John Mack is an example. He became an instant luminary in the field and stuck with it despite the fact that he was under attack by his colleagues at Harvard University and despite all the loonies that the field attracts. Dr. Jacques Vallée, who I think is maybe the most important researcher in the history of ufology, he basically walked away from it. He was tired of it. It's not getting anywhere. So yeah, it's a mess. I don't see it getting any better. People dig in their heels and think they know the truth, and it's almost a religion to some folks. It's a wonderful and important mystery that deserves to be taken seriously and be investigated fairly. It hasn't happened, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the nutcases that it attracts.
Carl in Akron, Ohio, asks if we're getting any closer to government disclosure of UFO reality.
I would have to say no. I don't think so. Art, you and I have been this a long time, and it seems like every year you hear it, oh, yeah, it's just around the corner. I don't think so. If you want to go back to Area 51 as an example, I had been working with this congressional investigator who worked on the black budget, and, he put it this way, look, when this stuff comes out, people will go to jail. I mean, they've been stealing money, diverting it from legitimate national security programs, lying to Congress. Maybe in the beginning there were good reasons for the cover-up because of how upsetting the reality might have been if the news had broken. Now I think it has a lot to do with covering their butts.
George, do you remember the official government explanation for Roswell? Do you remember the silly press conference they had after we saw the dummies that they claimed were dropped? You remember that?
Oh, I sure do. I mean, which version are they going to come out with next week? They've so hopelessly muddled that story. And maybe that's on purpose, because, they told what probably is the truth in the beginning. Then there was the first cover story about a weather balloon. Then later it was a double secret probation weather balloon and the bodies. And, ufologists have not done a very good job themselves. We can't seem to agree on what the exact date of the crash was and whether it's one crash or two and where it happened and how many bodies. I suspect something really did happen. I think the government's lying about it, but it's now so hopelessly muddled, I'm not sure we're ever going to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, me too. Roger in Detroit, Michigan, you're on the air with George Knapp. Roger in Detroit. Going once, going twice, gone. To Jason in San Diego. Hi. We don't seem to be hearing the people that we're putting on. Jason in San Diego, are you there? I think we may have... are you still there, George?
Yes.
Okay. Let's try one more. Let's see. Mike in North Dakota, you're on the air. Ooh. Are you hearing anybody, George?
No, I'm not.
I'm not either. I wonder where our board op went. Okay. All right. They're checking into it, George. Apparently, these people are here. They're all actually there. For some reason, we're just unable to hear them. So we'll work on it. We'll see what we can do. It's some sort of technical problem. Anyway, have they used up at the ranch any professional psychics, remote viewers, people of that caliber? Have they brought them in?
Yes. There was a remote viewer. I don't think I can use his name, but you can guess about him. It's probably the most renowned remote viewer who was tasked by Bob Bigelow to take a look at it and described it to a T. I think he was here. He was up at Mount Charleston when he did the remote viewing and had never seen the ranch, but drew it an exact replica. It's really amazing. He had a sense of some sort of foreboding, some sort of an evil presence underground in a particular part of the ranch, and it sort of fits with a lot of what we've heard over the years from other people. The Native Americans believe that whatever this thing is, that it sort of lives in the ground at least part of the time. The people who lived on the ranch, the people who still live in the area, say they often hear things underground, almost like a train rumbling down there. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that seems to get that entity stirred up is digging, is moving earth around. In fact, when Tom Gorman bought the property from the previous owners, they included a very strange stipulation in the contract, in the sales agreement, that he was not to do any digging on the property until he had until he gave the previous owners prior notice, which he thought, well, that's just sort of an eccentric little little tidbit that they threw in. Couldn't understand it, but he sort of understood it later.
All right. Well, that brings up one more interesting topic. Then I'm told we can go back to the phones. And that is, they sensed a great foreboding. So if you had to make a call, George, and you had to say these are friend or foe, Dr. Jacobs thinks we're all pretty foolish to think they're warm, fuzzy little creatures who have our best interests in mind. What do you think?
Well, it's sort of a mixed bag. I suspect that whoever they are, that they're a lot like us, that maybe they have more than one motive. There's more than one agenda being played out. My general feeling, though, is that they could do us a lot more harm than they've done if they chose to do so. That was amply demonstrated on the ranch. They didn't mutilate people. They mutilated cattle. They incinerated dogs. They did other things to other kinds of animals, but made a distinction between doing that to humans. They certainly terrorized people there, and there were psychological scars and a couple of minor physical impacts, but in general, they could have done a lot worse if they wanted to. So there is at least some level of restraint there. What their real motives are, I have no idea.
Well, that's a little bit of hope anyway. All right, I'm told that we now, I apologize to those that we missed because of a technical error. Bill in Arizona, you're on with George Knapp.
Hello, it's good to talk to you both tonight. I'm calling from Arizona, and I'm not too far from Vegas. One night, my family and I were coming back from Lake Mead, which I'm sure you're both familiar with. We saw a bunch of strange lights, had no idea what it was. I drove up on it, and when we got to where it was about 2 miles away, it was gone. Thought nothing more of it. Well, within a week, there was a very expensive motorhome with about an 8 to 10 foot dish parked out there towards the lake where we saw it. And the dish was rotating like a radar screen or something like that. And within 2 days after that, there was 6 or 7 helicopters that spent 2 days full of military troops, because they fly so low over my house that you could actually see the guys with their M16s flying around the area. And they searched this area very, very well. And I was wanting to know if either one of you had heard anything about that.
Well, I certainly had not heard of it, but it does bring up the subject of government involvement where these things are seen. George?
Well, there is ample evidence that the government monitors this stuff on a regular basis, and I would hope that they would. I suspect that they don't know the ultimate answers to the obvious questions any more than we do. They might have more information, but I'm not sure that they know what the bottom line is. As for Lake Mead, we have records dating back to the 40s of UFO sightings, pretty dramatic sightings over that area. However, as a caveat to this, that they do use Lake Mead for regular training exercises. I've been on the lake in boats when I've seen these giant helicopters dropping Navy SEALs or commandos or something into the water and then retrieving them. So I'm not trying to throw water on what you saw, just that they do use that area on a regular basis for regular prosaic training exercises.
All right. Third wildcard line would be Dan in Seattle, Washington. You're on with George Knapp.
Yes, Art, this is Dan in the U District. It's been a long time since I've gotten through. 10 years.
It has
maybe.
been, yes.
And by the way, welcome home, Art.
Thank you.
George, I've got a question to see if there's any updates on that email you sent me about that incredible video that I emailed you about a couple years ago, shot by an Iranian newsman, of that disc that's now, I guess, in the possession of TV1 in Iran.
I'm sorry, I haven't seen it. I don't have access to it. We're not on very good terms with the Iranians these days.
Yeah.
I remember what you're mentioning. Yeah, I remember you referencing it. I have not seen it.
Yeah, it was an incredible video. In fact, I was shocked by it because you could see detail on it. You could see windows and everything.
Okay, well, again, it's going to be very muddled because right now, I would imagine that whatever we've got that we're willing to break out and so that we can watch Iran very carefully is probably flying in the skies over Iran. And, of course, there have been tons and tons of recent reports of UFO activity in Iran. So what do you think, George?
We're on the same page on that one. I'll bet there are all sorts of UFOs flying over Iran right now. and that we built most of them.
Exactly. All right, Roger in Detroit, Michigan, you're on the air with George Knapp.
Good morning, gentlemen, Art and George. I have a question about a fellow named Phil Schneider. I watched a video he did. He did a couple of videos, and I watched it online. You know, I haven't been using a computer that long. I haven't been listening to you very long, but I enjoy your show. And is Phil Schneider for real?
I'm sorry, I don't know the guy.
Oh, you don't know him? You never heard of him? You've never seen any of his interviews online?
Nope, can't say I have.
Oh, okay. All right.
What does he talk about?
Well, he was supposedly a geologist that worked for the government, and he supposedly killed one of the Greys at Dulce Base, and he was supposed to be part of, boring tunnels, and he was talking about all this stuff, and then he just came up dead. It was kind of scary watching it. He even had a couple fingers missing off of one hand where he claimed he was shot.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like somebody we'd like to probably know more about, or possibly know more about. There's so much confusion in this whole area of ufology, and separating the wheat from the chaff is just a constant full-time job. Jeff in California, west of the Rockies, you're on with George.
Hi, Art, George. I'd like to know if either one of you know any more about the UFO at Norton Air Force Base that Colonel Corso described in The Day After Roswell. I almost said tomorrow. The reason I'm asking, I was stationed at Norton Air Force Base, and to this day, even with base transfers, there's a warehouse-style building that has not been bulldozed, that has a Faraday-type chamber in it, from what I understand from a person who worked the air conditioning there on the base. And he indicated there was a whole lot of air conditioning in that building. And it's run by Northrop Grumman. It has been run by TRW and was their space and missile systems operations for many years. But that building is still there, and everything else has been pretty much remodeled or redesigned. Do you guys know any more about that particular aspect that Colonel Corso described in his book?
I don't. I'm sorry to say. I'm hate to be striking out for you here, but I've read the same stuff. That's pretty much it. Sorry.
Okay, well, maybe I'll contact you guys and let you know what I do know about it, because
please do.
More trickling out.
Yeah, please do. You said the building is still there despite everything else being demolished, so that's pretty interesting. If you have anything on it, by all means, please get it to us. Mike in Louisiana, you're on with George.
Yes, I just had something to add. You had mentioned, Bell had mentioned that he had seen a craft that seemed to float along.
Oh, yes.
And there is a company, Ariane 26, and I think you can even find them on the web. They had done some little gadget called a deltoid pumpkin seed. It was a lighter-than-air aircraft, but it wasn't shaped like a dirigible or a Hindenburg. It was a aerodynamic craft. And some of the things that have come along is aerogel. It's an aerogel. I think they call it solid smoke. It's actually a lighter-than-air material for building large structures. And,
it could be. It could be. I can't deny that it could be something like that.
Yeah, and the U-2. When we found out that the U-2 existed, the SR-71 was already in operation, and there's things out there that are black projects, I'm sure. But when I was in the service in the late 70s, I seen some things up in Kansas that definitely weren't dirigibles. I kind of think it could have been unmanned vehicles back then, because one of the things, there was a nuclear jet engine project that Pratt & Whitney and General Electric were involved in the early 60s. There was also NERVA, which was another option if we didn't get the Saturn V's when we were going to the moon. And all of these projects had problems with shielding the crew. But, if you could solve some of the problems, I wouldn't see why we wouldn't have, these sort of things. I mean, we use submarines to put people into, important places when we got to do it quietly. So, we probably have terrestrial technology.
Well, maybe so, sir. But, here's what I would say. If we really have these craft, these triangles, and if these triangles are all ours, then why fly them predominantly over interstate highways? Why fly them where people are going to see them if they're all this big a secret? why make them so damn public in the sense that, and I think the major place they've been seen is over interstate highways. Had you heard that, George?
That's true. Yeah, the NID study I referenced earlier tracked it. Over highways, over cities, and on air routes between air bases. And of course, if they're from somewhere else, they might have interest in all of those things.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. If it's a big secret, then why fly it in full public view? Wildcard line, Joe in Los Angeles. You're on with George Knapp.
Hey, Art. Twice in one night. I really do feel special. I have a question here for George. I've seen either a special on the History Channel or some like-minded channel. And it was talking about these cattle mutilations, and I wondered if you could expand on what they were saying. They basically tried to debunk cattle mutilation by saying certain bacteria, I may be misquoting it, but germs or bacteria that were able to make more precise cuts than the steadiest of surgeon human hands. And I wondered if you had any more information for that, and I'll take the answer off the air. Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there have been a variety of explanations for cattle mutilations over the years, and none of them really work. I mean, we heard it was Satanists. We heard it was predators like coyotes. Well, now this one. There's no bacteria, for example, that cut up that calf on the Skinwalker Ranch, not in a matter of minutes, not taking 75 pounds of meat off of its bone and ripping the bones out. Some of these mutilation cases, the ball joints have been ripped out of the steers. It's very precise parts that are taken. You look at them under a microscope, and it's surgical. There have even been indications of high heat used as cutting instruments, pinking shears. The natural explanation doesn't cut it.
Hold it right there, George. This is Coast to Coast AM. We'll be right back. I kind of wonder if George, who's been at this game for a long, long time now, has any advice for other reporters out there around the country. There are a lot of them, radio and television reporters, who might consider delving into this realm. In a moment, we'll find out. Mike in Auburn, Washington says, hey, Art, I thought you just said on your show the past 2 nights you're not using screeners anymore. You obviously know the names of the people that have been phoning in tonight, and so you're using screeners. Well, look, no, I didn't say that. What I said was I'm not using screeners during open lines, Mike, and anybody else who might be confused on the issue. During open lines, I'm doing unscreened calls. When we have a guest, it's a different story. So there you have it. We want to make sure that there is some sort of relevant question that you're asking. Now, George, here's a relevant one for you. There are many reporters across the country. Some of them, no doubt, are thinking of doing stories in this area, perhaps, for the first time. Would you have any advice for them?
Well, I would say come on in. The water's fine. However, these are treacherous waters. There is a tremendous learning curve in this. You can't just jump into the deep end and think you're going to solve this mystery. I remember naively thinking back when I started, well, heck, give me 6 months, I'll get to the bottom of this thing. Well, here it is a lot of years later, and I'm still no closer to it because, there is a learning curve. You have to figure out who to trust and who not to trust, who to believe, what to believe. I mean, 95% of all that I hear in the field is just nonsense, or there is a prosaic explanation. It's that other 5 to 10% that's the heart of the matter. That's interesting. That would be where I would focus my attention. But take it slow. That would be my advice. Take it slow. Learn the ground rules and who to trust, because it is treacherous and it's hard to figure out what to believe.
Yeah, that, and plus what you mentioned earlier, that then when you go back to another story, they're going to be tossing little green men at you for the rest of your career.
That's true, and I think that has a great deal to do with why the networks don't give it more coverage. See, a History Channel has a UFO show on every night, and they do fine work. But if we really want to generate some change to get people fired up, you need somebody like CBS News covering this stuff. When they've done UFO stories, they always get a tremendous reaction, but those network correspondents don't want to be slammed with this. I remember when 48 Hours came here to do a UFO special. They did an hour show, and of course Area 51 was part of it. They had to drag those reporters kicking and screaming into doing that program because they were worried it would follow them. It doesn't have to be that way. You can do good reporting in
the
this
Peter
field.
Jennings. You remember the Peter Jennings special?
Yeah.
Well, of course, ufology roundly criticized the Peter Jennings special, and from their perspective, perhaps rightly so, it didn't do everything they wanted, and of course it couldn't. However, for the general public, I thought it was a good first step.
I did too. I mean, you know, obviously they gave short shrift to a couple of parts of those stories. You know, Roswell, I thought they really did Stan Friedman an injustice, and I thought the on the abduction stuff, they dismissed that pretty easily. I was happy to see that there was coverage, and a lot of the tone, at least for the first part of the program, was pretty supportive that this is a legitimate area for inquiry. The ultimate end was not very satisfying, but I was like you. I was glad to see some attention.
Well, I wonder if the feedback encouraged them to do a follow-up or discouraged them from ever touching it again. We'll find out. First-time caller line, Andy in San Antonio. You're on with George.
Hey, Art and George. I just wanted to ask George if he'd known about a attempt to recover one of the first autonomous aircraft that the U.S. developed at Roswell around the same time.
Sorry, I don't know anything about that one.
All right. The reason I asked is that I had a buddy who lived with his grandfather and had been out there at Roswell. He claimed to have been there at Roswell and seen the aliens in the aircraft, but he was of a level of top secret clearance that he was out there at the time. His purpose was to recover an autonomous aircraft developed by the U.S., top secret deal. And he went out there to recover the craft and ran into some U.S. military that was saying, no, you can't go out there. There's something out there. He's like, well, I'm going to go get my craft, and if you don't have a level 4 secret clearance, you can't come. So he ended up going out there and found the aliens and described the craft to me and the aliens to me, and sounds pretty interesting. He said that he saw live bodies and dead bodies, and the live alien communicated to him that in the same dialect, he said, I would be much obliged if you went up on top of the hill and recovered one of the bodies for me. And so he and his team recovered the alien and went off to find the top secret aircraft out there. And
well, that's a heck of a story. I've never heard of us having an atomic-powered aircraft, certainly not back then. That would be an amazing technical achievement. Art, you ever heard of us having an atomic aircraft?
No, that's a new one on me. We're kind of getting to the point where those who participated in Roswell as adults are pretty much not with us any longer. Is that story going to eventually die, or do you think it will just sort of live on and expand?
Well, like you said, all the first-hand witnesses are rapidly disappearing. I can't imagine that there would be government files left somewhere where the public could access them that deal with the truth about Roswell. I don't know where you go from here. Maybe there's still a Jesse Marcel out there somewhere hanging on who wants to tell a story, but I think it's just about gone as far as it can go. However, you've got folks looking into other kinds of crashes. They had a crash retrieval conference here organized by Ryan Wood here in Las Vegas back in, I think, November. And you got a lot of folks who are interested in that particular discipline. So maybe Roswell isn't going to have any new secrets come out, but there are other ones to investigate.
Now, you remember Congressman Schiff, late Congressman Schiff, he requested the records, and they were all gone, destroyed, or missing.
Yeah, and I suppose there might be a vault somewhere, but it's not a vault that you or I are ever going to see.
Jason in San Diego, you're on with George Knapp. Hi.
Well, I'd like to say that there are nuclear-powered aircraft. In fact, the U-2 and the SR-71 are both nuclear-powered. And I also want to say this, that in 1989...
Wait. Stop there. I'm not aware they're nuclear-powered.
No, they have Pratt and Whitney engines.
Federation of American Scientists Online, you can punch in ASPEN, and that stands for Aerospace Plane with Nuclear Engines. In fact, we've been working on one since the Manhattan Project. The United States was interested in making an atomic-powered aircraft in order to basically stay up there forever. I mean, basically 20 years.
No, I don't doubt.
But wait, this is the question I want to ask.
Ask.
In 1989, when the SR-71 was being retired, basically the government dug a big hole in the ground and buried the SR-71s, which are made out of titanium, worth billions of dollars worth of aircraft, buried them in the ground. At the same time is when people at the base started coming down with radiation poisoning. And then this is when George Knapp and your buddy Lazar, come out and start, claiming that UFOs are on the base. Meanwhile, contractors on the base are dying. Are you involved in covering up basically the nuclear program? And think about the deaths of these contractors. A lot of these people work in Las Vegas and fly in on Janet, Airlines. I think this is what's really going on, is that the United States has had these nuclear-powered aircraft. When we decided to retire them, and when they were up in 1989, people on the base started dying.
Okay,
and
so the question is, hold on, caller, hold on. The question is, are you involved in covering up the fact that these aircraft were nuclear powered? George?
Well, the SR-71 and the U-2 certainly were not nuclear powered. They were powered by Pratt and Whitney engines, and I have no doubt that the U.S. government and the military have looked into having atomic powered aircraft and would like to have them. The fact is, I seriously doubt we had them back in the 1940s when that last caller was referring to. As for burying SR-71s out at Area 51, I seriously doubt it. I think most of those are accounted for, and most of them have gone to other air bases for display purposes. Some of them are still flying, and they weren't radioactive to begin with. As for the question about the Groom Lake workers getting sick, not only have I not covered it up, I'm the guy who first reported it. We KLAS-TV, at my direction, fought all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court with those workers. We won minor victories in forcing the opening of a lot of those files. We walked hand in hand with them through every step of the way, and I think what happened to them is an absolute tragedy. But it's not because SR-71s were buried in the ground. It's because of all the component materials from stealth and all kinds of other stuff that they burned in open pits and that covered the base day after day with giant piles of black smoke. We reported it. It's been picked up elsewhere. There is no cover-up.
Thank you, George. All right. Ann in Texas somewhere or another, you're on with George.
Uh-huh. Dr. Mack, when he passed, who's taking over his work and different ones like Colonel Corso and different ones? Are you privy to who's maybe picking up the gauntlet?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Who is going to be coming along who'll be the next Dr. Mack or Colonel Corso?
Well, there's no one of Dr. Mack's stature in the field, I don't think, and especially in the area of abduction research. But Dr. David Jacobs is a good man and a good researcher. I have a great deal of respect for Bud Hopkins. He doesn't have the academic credentials that these other folks do, but he's pioneered in that field. I don't know that those shoes of Dr. Mack can ever be filled, but there are some good people, in particular in abduction research, who are plugging away. As for Colonel Corso, I'm not sure. I mean, I think he might have been one-of-a-kind guy. There are other people like him who are probably privy to secrets. I hope they come forward someday and can help us shed light on this mystery, but we're waiting.
All right. Stanley in New York, your turn with George Knapp.
Yeah, good morning, George, and good morning, Art. I was curious, in terms of percentage-wise, and by the way, as far as people eventually coming out with stories, they will reach their inevitable death on deathbeds, and maybe then we'll be able to get deathbed confessions from people who have worked, who have nothing to lose anymore at that point. So that's maybe when we'll really get some great inside information. But up until then, what percentage possibility would you say that this is simply a matter of human beings having great creative minds and things happening optically to their eyes, to their minds, to their connection, and that there is virtually nothing going on in terms of percentage? Is there a chance that absolutely nothing extraterrestrial is going on? It's a figment of our imagination.
All right. That's actually a pretty...
Yeah,
it's a good question. All right, George?
Well, I would say 90 to 95% is the term that most serious researchers would use to say how many can be explained away through prosaic means, clouds, planets, planes, weather balloons, whatever. And in fact, when I went to Russia over there, back in the early 90s, the Russian files that I accessed, their military conducted a 10-year nationwide study, tens of thousands of cases. They reached the same sort of conclusion that 90 to 95% could be explained. As I said a couple of minutes ago, it's that other 5 to 10% that's interesting. And how many do you need? I mean, one would be enough. There are some very good cases that cannot be explained away. There are some very good ones that have been well documented, and were physical effects and radar sightings and film and things of that sort that exist that are not in the imagination.
So you would say there's virtually then no chance that all of this could just be explained away by psychological anomalies?
Not at all. I mean, there's a small percentage that are real and unexplainable. In fact, I think, as Stan Friedman often says, there were government studies back in the Blue Book days that looked at psychological possibilities as an explanation. That was a very small percentage, I think 5 or 6%.
Okay. Paul in Los Angeles, you're on with George Knapp.
Hi. Good morning, George and Art.
Good morning.
I have been listening for years in hopes of hearing a story like mine, and I haven't yet. Real short, we were on the beach, and me and my ex-wife, and we were stalked by a flying saucer. It was a short distance off the water, and it was matching our direction and our speed, and whichever way we turned, it matched it just instantly. And I was a law enforcement officer at the time, and I had really good instincts, and I had a good sense of fear, and I really felt at that point that we were going to be abducted, and I sensed a real evil. We hid for a while, and it eventually took off. But I tell you, it was one of the most frightening experiences for me and her, and I haven't heard a story like that. I've heard of abduction stories, but I've never heard of near abduction stories. And also, there would seem to be a real strong psychic connection at that point in time. Just a real deep fear and a real connection that I've never had, since. And I was wondering if there was any other stories that are or something else that like that, because
okay. All right. Have you heard of any UFOs? I have. I've had calls, George, from people who have told me that story, that they've had their speeds and directions and turns matched by UFOs.
Yeah, I've heard those kinds of stories in the literature. There are several of them where they've been stalked and shadowed essentially by UFOs. A lot of folks have had the emotional reactions that this guy was talking about. In fact, on the ranch, they had some of that. Some of these balls, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but some of the balls, these blue balls that seem to be made out of glass with a liquid inside, generated fear way out of proportion, and it seemed to almost feed on it.
That's interesting. You said blue balls that seem to be made of glass with liquid inside. Why that description? That's pretty specific.
Yeah, I know. That was a regular thing that the folks saw on the ranch. These things appeared to be about the size of a softball, maybe a little bit bigger, a glass-like exterior, and then inside was kind of a bubbling blue liquid, and they would just hover there and seem to either generate or feed off of fear. I mean, just mind-numbing, fall-to-your-knees kind of fear, way out of proportion for what the rancher and his wife had ever experienced before.
Fascinating. Marie in San Francisco, you're on with George. Hi.
Hello, George and Art. Question. I heard the year 40s, and I also heard Lake Mead. In 1943, I lived in a government facility between Lake Mead and the highway close to BMI, Basic Magnesium Incorporated, and my uncle was a guard there. I have his little books where he logged people in, and he also saw a crash. And he came home, and the next day we moved. We went over actually it was at night, we went over the dam, we went into the desert, we went javelin hunting in the middle of nowhere, and we didn't surface again until around Christmas.
All right,
And
ma'am.
I just
We're so
thought it
short.
was an
Ma'am,
auto
hold on.
crash.
Hold on. We're so short on time here. The program is ending. But if you have anything in writing that is really important, do you?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be willing to get it to us?
Well, I have it, and I'd be willing to give it to somebody. But, you know, just to send it off in the blue, it's
No. I don't want you to
scary.
do that. No, I don't want you to do that.
Okay, well, I don't want to take up your time, but...
All right. What I would like you to do is consider, thank you very much, please consider getting it copied. Don't send any originals anywhere, but it does sound like you might have something. Please get copies of it and get it either to George Knapp at KLAS Television in Las Vegas, or get it to me. Somehow, George, that had the ring of reality.
Yeah, that sounded pretty intriguing there. I'm willing to take a look at it.
You just know, sitting around the country in various places, George, there is stuff like that. And there was just something about that lady's voice. Listen, the program is ending. We're out of time. I cannot thank you enough for being here tonight, George, and sort of bearing your soul.
Great to talk to you again, Art, and let's get together when you're in town.
You know it'll happen. Take
Okay.
care, George.
Bye.
All right, everybody, that's it. That's this weekend. We return your sets to the weekday version. George will be here tomorrow night to carry on. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for all the response. And from the high desert, good night.